The massive space station hung in the void like a glittering jewel. Inside its crystal halls, representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for what they thought would be just another boring meeting. They had no idea they were about to witness the beginning of everything changing forever. Ambassador Chun walked through the corridors, her simple human clothes looking plain next to the exotic outfits of alien diplomats. Some wore flowing robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. Others had mechanical suits that hummed with energy. A few didn't wear anything at all, their crystalline bodies reflecting the station's lights like living diamonds. As she passed, Chun could hear the whispers. The translator devices made sure she understood every word, even when the aliens thought she couldn't. "Look at that primitive creature," hissed a snake-like being from the Serpentine Collective, still using those crude vocal cords to communicate. "I heard they still use paper for some of their records," laughed a floating gas cloud entity. "Paper! Can you imagine?" Chun kept walking, her face showing nothing. But inside she was counting. Every insult, every dismissive comment, every cruel joke. Humanity had been keeping score for 300 years, and the bill was almost due. The Grand Assembly Hall was enormous. The ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into artificial clouds. Thousands of seats floated at different levels, each one designed for a different type of alien body. The humans sat in a small section near the back. Almost forgotten. Admiral Reeves sat with the human delegation, his old uniform looking shabby compared to the gleaming armor and flowing robes around him. He had served in the Colonial Defense Force for 40 years, watching humanity struggle to find its place among the stars. His weathered hands showed scars from battles most of the galaxy had forgotten. "Today," announced the session leader, a towering being made of what looked like living metal, "we showcased the latest advances in galactic defense technology." The first presentation came from the Zephyrian Empire. Their ships materialized in the center of the hall as holograms each, one beautiful and terrifying. The vessels looked like they were carved from pure energy, constantly shifting between different states of matter. "Behold our quantum phase destroyers," declared Chancellor Vexstar, his voice filled with pride. "These ships can exist in multiple dimensions at once. Enemy fire passes right through them, while they can strike from angles that don't even exist." In normal space, the audience gasped in amazement. The ships were incredible, moving through space like ghosts, appearing and disappearing at will. Each one was the size of a small city and packed with enough firepower to crack a planet. Next came the Crystalline Confederacy. Their representative, a being that looked like a walking diamond, gestured as massive geometric ships appeared in the display. "Our molecular forge vessels can reshape matter itself during battle," she announced. "Need a shield? We create one from the space dust around us. Need a weapon? We transform our hull into a cannon. These ships can become whatever the battle requires." The demonstration showed ships literally melting and reforming into new shapes. A cruiser became a massive cannon. A destroyer split into a dozen smaller fighters. The technology was beyond anything most species could imagine. Other presentations followed: ships that could travel faster than light without using hyperspace, weapons that could destroy targets by erasing them from time itself, armor that existed in pocket dimensions until needed. With each display, the aliens grew more impressed with each other and more dismissive of the humans sitting quietly in the back. "I wonder what the humans will show us," chuckled a four-armed traitor from the Outer Rim. "Maybe they've finally figured out how to make their engines run on something other than chemical fuel. Perhaps they'll demonstrate their amazing ability to communicate without telepathy," added a floating jellyfish-like creature, its mental laughter rippling through the minds of nearby aliens. The jokes got crueler as the day went on. Some aliens started making bets on how badly the human demonstration would go. Others wondered aloud if humans should even be allowed in the assembly at all. Admiral Reeves listened to it all, his jaw getting tighter with each insult. Beside him, Captain Torres quietly checked her communication device. Deep in space, far from prying eyes, the real human fleet was making final preparations. "You know what I love about humans? said a blob-like creature from the mucus systems, its words dripping with sarcasm. They're so optimistic. They actually think they belong here with real civilizations. It's cute, really, agreed an insectoid warrior whose species had conquered half a dozen solar systems. Like watching children play with toy spaceships. Shun finally reached the central podium. The massive hall fell into an expectant silence, though she could still hear quiet chuckling from various sections. The translator systems hummed as they prepared to carry her words to every corner of the assembly. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice steady and clear. "The Human Federation formally requests permission to demonstrate our fleet capabilities in the upcoming Galactic Defense Exhibition." The silence lasted for exactly 3 seconds. Then the hall exploded in laughter. The sound was unlike anything ever heard in the assembly. Thousands of different species, each with their own way of expressing amusement, created a symphony of mockery. Some roared, others chittered, a few made sounds like grinding metal. The floating gas clouds pulsed with amused colors. Fleet capabilities? Wheezed Chancellor Vexstar, his translation device barely keeping up with his laughter. "What fleet? Those rust buckets you call warships?" "I've seen their vessels," called out a representative from the Machine Collective. "They look like they were built in a scrapyard by blind mechanics." "With primitive tools," added another voice. "And no understanding of basic physics," chimed in a third. The insults came faster now, each alien trying to top the last one. They talked about human ships like they were jokes. Crude metal boxes held together with bolts and hope. Engines that belched flame instead of manipulating space-time. Weapons that fired simple projectiles instead of reality-warping energy. "They still use nuclear fusion for power," laughed an energy being from the Plasma Nebula. "Nuclear fusion! What's next? Are they going to show us how to make fire?" But Sheen didn't look embarrassed or angry. She stood calmly at the podium, waiting for the laughter to die down. Her patience seemed to make some of the aliens even more amused. Admiral Reeves watched the display with growing anger, but also with something else, anticipation. He knew what was coming. More importantly, he knew what the aliens didn't know. For 300 years, humanity had been the galaxy's punching bag. The species everyone could look down on. The primitive newcomers who had somehow stumbled into space travel, but clearly didn't belong among the advanced civilizations. What they didn't realize was that humans had been listening, learning, studying. Every piece of technology, every tactical doctrine, every weakness of every species that had ever dismissed them. "Very well," said Chancellor Vexstar when the laughter finally died down. "We shall grant your amusing request. But let us make this demonstration educational." His crystalline features gleamed with malicious joy as he leaned forward in his floating throne. "A formal challenge," he announced. "Your entire human fleet. Against our newest battle group. When you lose, and you will lose, humanity will accept permanent protectorate status under Zephyrian protection." The hall fell silent again, but this time the silence was shocked. Even by galactic standards, this was cruel. The Zephyrian battle group consisted of 12 quantum-phased destroyers, each one capable of destroying human civilization single-handedly. Chun's expression didn't change. She looked around the hall, seeing the mix of anticipation and pity on alien faces. Some species that were friendly to humans looked genuinely worried. The peaceful Centaurians were making distress sounds in their musical language. Admiral Reeves stood slowly. At 73 years old, he had seen humanity's worst defeats and greatest victories. He had been there when the first human colony ship was destroyed by pirates who thought humans were too weak to fight back. He had commanded the defense of Earth Station when 3 different alien species tried to claim human space for themselves. "We accept," he said simply. The words hit the assembly like a thunderclap. Even the aliens who had been laughing looked shocked. Accepting such a challenge was either incredible bravery or incredible stupidity. 3 light years away, Captain. Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching her crew make final preparations. Around her, 56 other ships hung in space like sleeping predators. Her ship looked exactly like what the aliens expected. Crude metal hull scarred by countless battles. weapons that appeared to be simple kinetic cannons, engines that glowed with the orange light of fusion fire instead of the elegant blue of antimatter or the invisible power of spatial manipulation, but Rodriguez smiled as she watched her engineering teams complete their work. The aliens had taught humanity an important lesson over the past 3 centuries. The most dangerous weapon was the one your enemy never saw coming. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had been very good students indeed. The Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with excited chatter as news of the challenge spread through the galaxy's communication networks. Within minutes, every major news outlet was reporting the story. Humans accept suicide mission, read one headline. Zephyrian Empire to demonstrate superior technology, read another. Chancellor Vexstar stood at the center of the hall, his crystalline body reflecting the lights like a living prism. His voice carried across the chamber with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. "Let me be clear about the terms," he announced, his words being translated into thousands of languages simultaneously. "This is not a training exercise or a friendly competition. This is a formal military challenge under Galactic Defense Protocol 7. Admiral Reeves felt a chill run down his spine. Protocol 7 meant real weapons, real destruction, and real consequences. It was usually reserved for settling territorial disputes between major powers. Using it against humanity was like bringing a cannon to fight an ant. If the humans lose, Vexstar continued, they will surrender all claims to military independence. Their armed forces will be disbanded. Their worlds will be placed under Zephyrian protection, and humanity will accept the status of a protected species." The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. A protected species was barely one step above being someone's pet. Protected species weren't allowed to have weapons, make their own foreign policy decisions, or even leave their home systems without permission. Furthermore, the Chancellor added with a cruel smile, any human vessels destroyed in this demonstration will not be replaced. Humanity will make do with whatever survives the encounter. Ambassador Shen stood at the human podium, her hands gripping the edges so tightly her knuckles were white. Around her, the other human delegates looked pale and worried. This was worse than anyone had expected, but then she heard Admiral Reeves chuckle softly behind her. "Something funny, Admiral?" she whispered. "They're giving us exactly what we wanted," he replied quietly. "They're so arrogant they can't see the trap they're walking into." Captain Martinez, the youngest member of the human delegation, leaned forward. "Sir, with respect, how is this a trap? We're talking about 12 quantum-phase destroyers. Our entire fleet doesn't have enough firepower to scratch one of them." Admiral Reeves turned to look at the young officer. Martinez had graduated from the academy just 5 years ago and had never served in the old wars. He didn't understand what humanity had learned during those dark years when they were fighting for survival. "Captain," the Admiral said softly, "what's the first rule of hunting?" Martinez looked confused. "I don't understand, sir." "The first rule of hunting," Reeves repeated, "is that you never let your prey know you're a predator until it's too late." To run across the hall, Chancellor Vexstar was detailing his battle group's capabilities to the assembled delegates. Each quantum-phase destroyer was 2 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Their phase shift technology made them nearly impossible to hit, while their quantum torpedoes could strike targets from other dimensions. "These vessels represent the pinnacle of galactic military technology," he boasted. "They are faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything else in known space. The human fleet will serve as an excellent demonstration of their capabilities." The alien audience was eating it up. Representatives from dozens of species were taking notes, clearly impressed by the Zephyrian technology. Some were probably already thinking about trade deals or military alliances. Meanwhile, 3 light years away, Captain Rodriguez received the news on her secured communication channel. She read the message twice, then called her senior officers. "To the bridge." "Well, people," she announced to her crew, "it's official. We're going to war." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They had been expecting this moment for months, but hearing it out loud still sent chills down their spines. "Ma'am," said Commander Blake, her second in command, The crew is asking about the odds, Rodriguez almost laughed. Tell them the odds are exactly what we've trained for. 57 human ships against 12 Zephyrian destroyers. They expect us to lose in the first 5 minutes. And will we? Asked Lieutenant Foster, the ship's tactical officer. Son, Rodriguez replied, we've been planning this fight for 300 years. The Zephyrians have been planning it for about 3 minutes. Who do you think has the advantage? Back at the assembly, the formal challenge documents were being prepared. Under galactic law, both sides had to agree to specific terms and conditions. The location would be the Kepler Demonstration Zone, a series of empty star systems used for military exercises. The battle would be broadcast live across. The Galaxy. Ambassador Chun read through the documents carefully. Everything looked standard except for one clause that made her smile. No restrictions on ship modifications or tactical doctrines, she read aloud. All vessels must be original military designs, but upgrades and improvements are permitted. Chancellor. Vexstar waved dismissively. Of course. We wouldn't want the humans to claim they lost because their ships were too primitive. Let them bring whatever improvements they think will help. He had no idea that this single clause was about to change galactic history. The Zephyrian delegation was already making plans for after their victory. They talked openly about which human worlds would make the best colony sites and how they would restructure human society. Some even discussed turning Earth into a tourist destination where aliens could observe primitive human culture. Admiral Reeves listened to their plans with the patience of a man who had been underestimated his entire career. These aliens were making the same mistake that pirates, raiders, and hostile governments had been making for centuries. They saw humanity's simple technology and assumed humans were simple too. They didn't understand that humans had learned to be patient. While other species rushed to build the biggest guns or the fastest ships, humans had spent their time studying their enemies. Every alien vessel that had ever visited human space had been quietly scanned and analyzed. Every piece of technology had been reverse-engineered and improved upon. Admiral, Chun whispered, are you sure about this? If we lose, it's not just our military. It's our entire civilization. Reeves looked around the hall at the thousands of alien faces, most of them already celebrating humanity's defeat. Ambassador, let me tell you something I learned during the colony wars. The best time to strike your enemy is when they're absolutely certain they've already won. The formal challenge was signed 3 hours later. Both sides agreed to meet at the Kepler Zone in 7 days. The Zephyrians needed time to move their battle group into position and set up the broadcast equipment. They wanted the entire galaxy to witness humanity's humiliation. What they didn't know was that humanity needed those 7 days too. But for very different reasons. As the assembly session ended and the delegates began to disperse, Captain Torres made a discreet call on her personal communicator. The signal bounced through 17 different relay stations before reaching its destination, a secret facility hidden in the asteroid belt around Jupiter. Phoenix Base, this is Torres, she said quietly. The Chancellor took the bait. Full authorization for Operation Revelation. The response came back immediately. Understood. All packs are moving to assembly points. The hunt begins in 7 days. Across human space, ships that had been hidden in remote systems began moving toward the Kepler Zone. These weren't the vessels the aliens had seen visiting other worlds or attending diplomatic functions. These were the ships humanity had been building in secret, designed with one purpose in mind on Earth. President Williams stood in the Situation Room watching the news broadcasts from across the galaxy. Every alien network was covering the story, and the commentary was uniformly dismissive of humanity's chances. They really have no idea, do they? Asked General Harper, the head of Colonial Defense. None whatsoever, Williams replied. 300 years of playing the underdog, and they still think we're the same species that got chased off Proxima Station. The crews are ready, Harper reported. Every ship, every weapon, every system has been tested and retested. We've run this scenario 10,000 times in simulation. Williams nodded. And the results? Total victory in every simulation. But sir, Harper paused, this won't be a simulation. If something goes wrong, if we've miscalculated somewhere, we lose everything. The president walked to the window, looking up at the stars that had once seemed so friendly. Now they were full of species that saw humanity as nothing more than a curiosity, a primitive culture that had stumbled into space. Travel by accident. General, he said finally, do you know what the aliens' biggest mistake was? Underestimating us, sir? No, Williams replied. Their biggest mistake was giving us 300 years to get angry. In 7 days, the galaxy would learn that humanity had been very good students indeed. They had learned patience, cunning, and most importantly, they had learned how to turn their enemies' arrogance against them. The hunt was about to begin, and the predators were ready to reveal themselves. 7 days later, the Kepler demonstration zone was filled with more ships than had ever gathered in one place. Thousands of vessels from across the galaxy hung in space like glittering stars, all positioned at safe distances to watch what everyone expected to be the shortest battle in galactic history. The zone itself stretched across 3 empty star systems, giving plenty of room for the fight and keeping observers far from any danger. Massive holographic displays had been set up so that beings across the galaxy could watch in real time. News crews from every major species were broadcasting live, their reporters barely able to contain their excitement. This is Zara Keth reporting. For Galactic News Network, announced a blue-skinned reporter floating near the main observation platform. In just moments, we'll witness what military experts are calling the most one-sided battle demonstration in recorded history. Chancellor Vexstar stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Around him, 11 other quantum-phase destroyers moved in perfect formation. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, their crystalline hulls shimmering as they phased in and out of normal space. All vessels report ready, announced his tactical officer. Quantum phase generators are operating at full capacity. We can engage and destroy the human fleet in less than 3 minutes. Vexstar nodded with satisfaction. This wasn't really a battle, it was a public execution designed to show the galaxy what happened to species that overstepped their boundaries. After today, no primitive civilization would dare challenge the established order again. Sir, called the communications officer, the human fleet is approaching the combat zone. Display them, Vexstar ordered. The main screen shifted to show the incoming human vessels, and the Zephyrian crew burst into laughter. 57 ships that looked like they had been assembled in a junkyard were limping toward the combat zone. The lead vessel, which intelligence reports identified as the UES Defiance, appeared to be held together with metal plates and crude welding. Are those actual rivets on their hull? Asked the weapons officer, pointing at the screen. I think I can see rust stains, added another crew member. Captain Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Defiance, listening to similar comments flooding the communication channels from the observation ships. Every alien in the zone was making jokes about humanity's pathetic fleet. Captain, called Lieutenant Foster from the tactical station, all ships report ready for Phase 1 revelation. Rodriguez nodded. Remind all crews to maintain the appearance until the signal is given. We want them nice and confident when we show them what human engineering really looks like. Around her, the bridge crew worked with calm efficiency. These weren't nervous soldiers heading into their first battle. These were veterans who had trained for this moment their entire careers. Every person on every human ship knew exactly what was about to happen. Ma'am, said Commander Blake, Admiral Reeves is requesting final confirmation on the pack tactics. Tell the Admiral that all wolves are ready to hunt. Rodriguez replied with a grim smile. 3 light years away, Admiral Reeves sat in the command center of the human observation post, watching dozens of screens showing different angles of the battle zone. President Williams stood beside him, along with the entire human high command. All packs report ready, announced General Harper. Operation Revelation is go on your command. The president looked at the screens showing their supposedly inferior fleet facing down the most advanced military force in the galaxy. For just a moment, doubt crept into his mind. If they had miscalculated, if their intelligence was wrong, if their technology failed, humanity would cease to exist as a free species. Mr. President, Reeves said quietly, our ancestors faced down saber-toothed tigers with pointed sticks. They conquered oceans in wooden boats. They flew to the moon in machines that had less computing power than a modern calculator. Humans have always done impossible things. Williams nodded and turned to the communications officer. Give Captain Rodriguez the go signal. Back in the combat zone, Chancellor Vexstar was growing impatient. The human ships had finally reached their designated starting position, and they looked even more pathetic up close. Their formation was loose and undisciplined. Their weapons appeared to be simple kinetic cannons that fired metal projectiles. This is almost disappointing, he muttered. I was hoping for at least some challenge. Sir, called his tactical officer, should we begin the engagement? Proceed, Vexstar ordered. Target their flagship first. Let's end this quickly. The Eternal Dominion began charging its quantum phase weapons, reality itself starting to bend around the massive destroyer. The other Zephyrian ships followed suit, their combined firepower enough to sterilize entire star systems. That's when Captain Rodriguez gave the signal that changed galactic history forever. All ships, she announced on the secure human frequency. Drop the masks. Show them what we really are. What happened next shattered 3 centuries of assumptions about human technology. The first shock came when every human ship suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds. Not the smooth, elegant movement of advanced alien propulsion, but brutal, violent acceleration that should have turned their crews into paste against the rear bulkheads. How are they moving that fast? Demanded Vexstar, watching the human vessels streak across his screens like angry meteors. Sir, their acceleration is reading at over 200 gravities, reported his science officer, voice filled with disbelief. No biological crew could survive those forces. Then they must be using artificial gravity compensation, the Chancellor snapped. All primitives eventually stumble onto that technology. But his confidence was already starting to crack. The human ships weren't just moving fast. They were moving with a precision that defied explanation. Each vessel seemed to know exactly where every other ship was going to be, creating a formation that flowed like liquid death through space. The second shock came when the Zephyrian weapons fired, and the humans simply weren't there, not because they moved out of the way, not because they used shields or armor. The human ships seemed to know exactly where each quantum torpedo would appear before it was even fired. They were already moving to positions where the weapons would miss by mere meters. Impossible, breathed the Zephyrian tactical officer. Our quantum phase weapons exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. There's no way to predict where they'll manifest. Chancellor Vexstar's crystalline features were beginning to show cracks of stress. Fire again. All ships, concentrated barrage on their flagship. The 12 quantum phase destroyers unleashed enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Reality, twisted and bent as exotic weapons that shouldn't exist in normal space, tore through the combat zone. Every shot missed. Not only did they miss, but the human ships seemed to be exactly where they needed to be to avoid each attack. It was like watching someone dance between raindrops in a thunderstorm. Captain, called Commander Blake from his station on the Defiance, enemy fire is following predicted patterns exactly. Our combat calculations were perfect, Rodriguez nodded grimly. Phase 2, let's show them what human weapons can do. The UES Savage, which had appeared to be nothing more than a converted cargo hauler, suddenly did something that made every alien observer question their understanding of physics. The ship split apart into 7 separate sections, each one moving independently while somehow maintaining perfect coordination. Sir, called the Zephyrian science officer, his voice shaking, those aren't separate ships. They're still reading as a single vessel on our sensors, but they're operating in 7 different locations simultaneously. Across the galaxy, alien. Military experts watched in stunned silence as human technology defied everything they thought they knew about space combat. The UES Nightmare's hull began absorbing enemy fire instead of deflecting it. storing the energy and somehow redirecting it back at the attackers with compound interest. But the real horror for the Zephyrians came when they realized their greatest advantage, their quantum phase technology, was being systematically neutralized. Every time they shifted between dimensional phases, the human ships were waiting in the exact position where they would emerge. "How are they doing this?" Vexstar screamed at his crew. "How do they know where we're going to be?" His tactical officer was frantically checking sensor readings. "Sir, it's like they can see through time. They're not reacting to our movements, they're anticipating them." Captain Rodriguez stood calmly on her bridge as chaos erupted around the Zephyrian formation. Her crew worked with mechanical precision, each person playing their part in a symphony of destruction that had been rehearsed thousands of times. "Target the Chancellor's flagship," she ordered. "Let's show him what 300 years of studying his technology has taught us." The Defiance, still looking like a rust bucket, held, together with Hope and metal plates, fired what appeared to be a simple kinetic projectile. Just a chunk of refined metal that any first-year engineering student could have designed, but as the projectile flew toward the Eternal Dominion, space around it began to fold and twist. The chunk of metal wasn't traveling through space at all. It was convincing space to move around it, taking shortcuts through dimensions that the Zephyrians had thought only they could access. The destruction of the Eternal Dominion sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian fleet. Chancellor Vexstar's flagship, the most advanced warship ever built, had been erased from existence by what looked like a simple metal projectile fired from a rust bucket. Commander Thexville, now the highest-ranking Zephyrian officer still alive, stared at the empty space where his Chancellor's ship had been just seconds before. His hands were shaking as he tried to process what had happened. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," he ordered, his voice cracking. "Maintain quantum phase rotation. Do not let them target lock on us." But even as he gave the orders, Thexville knew something was terribly wrong. The human ships weren't just lucky. They were hunting with a precision that defied everything the Zephyrians understood about space combat. Captain Rodriguez watched the enemy fleet scatter across her tactical display. Each Zephyrian ship was trying to use its phase-shifting technology to become untouchable, flickering in and out of normal space like deadly ghosts. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Foster, "all enemy vessels are attempting random phase patterns. They're trying to make themselves unpredictable." Rodriguez almost smiled. "Random patterns, show them why that's a mistake. Begin the demonstration." Across the human fleet, ships that had looked like crude metal boxes began revealing their true nature. The used Predator, which appeared to be held together with salvaged parts, suddenly unfolded like a mechanical flower. Hidden weapon systems emerged from what had looked like damaged hull plates. "Sir," gasped a Zephyrian sensor operator, "the human vessels are transforming. Their hull configurations are completely changing." Commander Thexville watched in horror as the human ships revealed weapon systems that shouldn't exist. Energy signatures that registered as impossible on their sensors. Technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics without breaking them. "How many weapons do they have hidden in those things?" he whispered. The answer came quickly. The UES Reaper fired what appeared to be a standard energy beam, but as it traveled through space, the beam split into dozens of smaller beams, each one tracking a different Zephyrian ship simultaneously. "Impossible," breathed the Zephyrian science officer. "A single weapon cannot target multiple phase-shifted vessels at once. The quantum interference should make it impossible to maintain targeting locks." But the human beam was doing exactly that. Worse, it seemed to be adapting to each target individually. When it hit the ZDS Stormcaller, the beam transformed into a frequency that perfectly countered the ship's quantum phase generator. The mighty destroyer was yanked back into normal space like a fish being pulled from water. In the observation area, alien military experts were frantically taking notes. Everything they thought they knew about space combat was being rewritten in real time. "This is Fleet Admiral Korth of the Centaurian Collective," announced a calm voice over the general communication channel. "All vessels are advised to maintain safe distance. We are witnessing technology beyond current galactic understanding. But the real shock was still coming. The UE Stalker, a ship that looked like it had been built from spare parts and hope, suddenly did something that made every alien physicist in the galaxy question their education. The ship fired what appeared to be a simple missile, but as it flew toward its target, the missile began to replicate itself. One missile became two. Two became four. Four became eight. Within seconds, a single projectile had become a swarm of hundreds, each one perfectly coordinated with the others. "Sir," called the Zephyrian tactical officer, "their missile is multiplying. Our point defense systems can't track them all." "Then use the quantum phase cannon," Dexville ordered desperately. "Maximum power. Destroy them all at once." The ZDS Void Ripper charged its most powerful weapon, reality bending around the massive destroyer as it prepared to fire. The quantum phase cannon could erase entire squadrons from existence, removing them from space-time itself. The weapon fired, tearing a hole in reality that reached across multiple dimensions. Where the missile swarm had been, there was now nothing but empty space twisted into impossible shapes. For a moment, the Zephyrians thought they had won. Then the missiles emerged from behind them, having somehow used the quantum distortion as a shortcut through space. "They used our own weapon as a transit method," whispered the science officer. "The missiles rode our quantum phase beam through dimensional space and emerged on our flank." The swarm struck the Void Ripper from 12 different angles simultaneously. Each missile carried a different type of warhead, designed to exploit a specific weakness in Zephyrian technology. The mighty destroyer didn't just explode, it unraveled, its quantum generators tearing themselves apart as human weapons turned the ship's own technology against it. Across the galaxy, alien news reporters were struggling to describe what they were witnessing. "The human weapons appear to be learning," announced a four-armed correspondent from the Spiral Arm Network. "Each attack is more effective than the last, as if their technology is studying Zephyrian defenses in real time." That observation was more accurate than the reporter knew. Captain Rodriguez stood on her bridge, watching her tactical display show the complete breakdown of Zephyrian formation. Her ship's artificial intelligence was analyzing every piece of data from the battle, learning and adapting with each passing second. "Ma'am," called Commander Blake, "the enemy is attempting to retreat. Should we pursue?" "Negative," Rodriguez replied. "Let them run, but make sure they understand why they're running." She turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to all Zephyrian vessels." "Channel open, ma'am." Rodriguez's voice carried across space to the fleeing Zephyrian ships. "Commander Dexville, this is Captain Rodriguez of the UES Defiance. You asked earlier how we were anticipating your movements." On the bridge of his damaged flagship, Dexville listened with growing dread. "The answer is simple," Rodriguez continued. "We've been studying your technology for 300 years. Every ship that ever visited human space was scanned. Every weapon you ever fired was analyzed. Every tactical doctrine you ever used was recorded and studied." The communication channel crackled as she paused. "You see, Commander, you made a fundamental error. You assume that because our ships look primitive, our minds must be primitive too. You never considered that we might be hiding our true capabilities behind a mask of perceived weakness." Admiral Reeves, watching from the Human Command Center, smiled grimly as he listened to Rodriguez's words. This was the moment he had been waiting for since the Colony Wars, when Zephyrian pirates had destroyed human settlements while laughing about human weakness. "Every insult you've thrown at us for 3 centuries," Rodriguez continued. "Every time you called us primitive, every time you dismissed our capabilities, you were teaching us about yourselves. You showed us your weaknesses because you never imagined we were smart enough to exploit them." In the observation area, thousands of alien vessels hung in stunned silence. The implications of what they were hearing went far beyond this single battle. "Our ships look crude because we wanted them to look crude," Rodriguez explained. "Our weapons appear simple because we designed them to appear simple. We've been playing a very long game, and today the game ends." The UES Wolverine demonstrated. This point by doing something that should have been impossible. The ship fired a weapon that seemed to travel backward through time, striking a Zephyrian destroyer before the weapon was actually fired. "Temporal manipulation," gasped an alien scientist. "They've weaponized time itself." But perhaps the most terrifying demonstration came from the UES Ghost. The ship simply vanished from all sensors, becoming completely undetectable. When it reappeared, it was inside the enemy formation, having somehow passed through the Zephyrian shields as if they didn't exist. Commander Thexville realized with growing horror that his remaining ships were completely outmatched. The humans weren't just winning, they were toying with the Zephyrian fleet like cats playing with mice. "All vessels," he ordered with what dignity he had left, "retreat to safe distance, we we surrender." The words echoed across the galaxy. Broadcasts lived to billions of beings who had thought they understood the balance of power in space. Captain Rodriguez's response was calm and professional. "Surrender accepted, Commander. Your remaining vessels are free to leave. Consider this a lesson in the dangers of underestimating your opponents." As the battered Zephyrian fleet limped away, alien observers tried to process what they had witnessed. The most advanced military force in the galaxy had been systematically destroyed by ships that looked like they belonged in a museum. "This changes everything," whispered Fleet Admiral Korth. "If humans have been hiding this level of technology, what else don't we know about them?" The question would haunt the galaxy for years to come, because the truth was even more terrifying than what they had just witnessed. This wasn't humanity's full strength. This was just a demonstration. The silence that followed the Zephyrian surrender was deafening. Across 3 star systems, thousands of alien vessels hung motionless in space, their crews struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The most powerful military force in the galaxy had been crushed in 17 minutes by ships that looked like they were built in a scrapyard. Captain Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the tactical display as the last Zephyrian escape pods were recovered. Her ship still looked exactly as rusty and crude as it had that morning, but now the entire galaxy knew that appearances could be the deadliest weapon of all. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Foster, "we're receiving communication requests from over 200 different species." "Everyone wants to talk," Rodriguez nodded. She had expected this. Fear had a way of making people very talkative very quickly. "Put me through to the main observation platform first," she ordered. "Let's address everyone at once." In the grand assemblies, floating observation deck, Ambassador Chun watched as alien representatives who had been laughing at humanity just hours earlier now sat in stunned silence. The snake-like beings from the Serpentine Collective were coiled tightly in what she recognized as their fear posture. The floating gas clouds had turned pale colors she had never seen before. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the human fleet," came the voice over the communication system. "To all observers, the demonstration is now complete. We are prepared to answer questions." Fleet Admiral Korth of the Centaurian Collective was the first to speak, his musical voice carrying notes of awe and concern. "Captain Rodriguez, what we have witnessed today challenges our understanding of technological development. How long has humanity possessed these capabilities?" Rodriguez's answer sent chills through every alien listener. "Admiral, humanity has been developing these technologies for approximately 250 years. We reached technological parity with current galactic civilizations about a century ago. We surpassed them 50 years ago." The implications hit the assembly like a physical blow. Humanity had been pretending to be primitive for over half a century while secretly developing technology that made the rest of the galaxy look like children playing with toys. "But why?" called out a representative from the Crystalline Confederacy, her diamond-like form flickering with confused patterns. "Why hide your true capabilities? Why accept ridicule and dismissal when you could have claimed your place among the great powers?" Admiral Reeves, still watching from the human command center, smiled grimly as he heard the question. President Williams stood beside him, knowing this moment would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. Rodriguez's answer was simple and terrifying. Because we were studying you. Every insult, every dismissive comment, every cruel joke taught us about your psychology, your tactics, your weaknesses. You showed us everything we needed to know because you never considered us a threat. In the observation area, alien military commanders were frantically reviewing their security protocols. How many human ships had visited their worlds? How many human diplomats had toured their facilities? How much classified information had they casually shared in front of beings they considered too primitive to understand? Furthermore, Rodriguez continued, we needed time to develop countermeasures for every major galactic military technology. Quantum phase generators, molecular forge weapons, temporal manipulation devices, dimensional shields. We've spent decades learning how to neutralize all of them. The Zephyrian observer, a replacement for the destroyed command staff, spoke with a shaking voice. Are you saying that humanity deliberately developed weapons specifically to counter our technologies? Not just yours, Rodriguez replied calmly. Every major military power in the galaxy. We have specific countermeasures for crystalline molecular weapons, plasma collective energy manipulation, machine collective adaptive systems, and dozens of others. We've been preparing for the day when the galaxy would try to put us in our place. The alien observers exchanged nervous glances. The humans hadn't just been hiding advanced technology, they had been conducting the most comprehensive intelligence. Operation in Galactic History. Ambassador Chun chose that moment to step forward. Her voice carried across the observation deck, with quiet authority. Esteemed colleagues, she began, today marks the end of one era and the beginning of another. For 3 centuries, the galaxy has operated under certain assumptions about power, technology, and civilization. Those assumptions are no longer valid. She gestured toward the human fleet, still floating in formation like sleeping predators. What you've witnessed today represents only a fraction of human capabilities. This was a demonstration, not a war. We used a small portion of our fleet and revealed only the technologies we were comfortable showing. The implications of her words sent waves of fear through the alien observers. If this was just a demonstration, what was humanity's full military capability? However, Chun continued, humanity has no desire for conquest or domination. We seek partnership, respect, and an end to the condescension we have endured for centuries. Fleet Admiral Korth leaned forward. What are humanity's terms? Chun smiled. Simple. Recognition as a full member of the galactic community with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Immediate cessation of all protectorate discussions. And most importantly, the understanding that humanity will no longer tolerate being treated as a lesser species. The response was immediate. Representatives from dozens of species began transmitting formal diplomatic overtures. The Centaurian Collective offered a full mutual defense treaty. The Spiral Arm Federation proposed immediate trade agreements with terms far more favorable than anything previously offered to humanity. But the most significant response came from an unexpected source. This is Empress Veltar of the Crystalline Confederacy, announced a melodious voice that carried the authority of one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. The Confederacy formally apologizes for our previous treatment of humanity and requests immediate diplomatic negotiations. More voices followed. The Machine Collective offered technology sharing agreements. The Plasma Federation proposed joint research initiatives. Even former enemies like the Raider clans were sending messages requesting non-aggression pacts. President Williams, watching from Earth, turned to Admiral Reeves. Think it's working? Better than we hoped, Reeves replied. Fear is a powerful motivator, but respect lasts longer. We've got both now. Captain Rodriguez received a priority message from her home government. The orders were simple: accept reasonable diplomatic overtures, but make it clear that humanity's patience had limits. Attention all vessels, she announced. Humanity appreciates the diplomatic interest we're receiving. However, let me be absolutely clear about our position. We are not the same species that was chased off Proxima Station 3 centuries ago. We are not the naive newcomers who accepted scraps from the galactic table. She paused, letting her words sink in. We are apex predators who have spent centuries learning how to hunt. Today we chose to show mercy. That choice should not be mistaken for weakness. The message was received loud and clear. Across the galaxy, military leaders were already revising their threat assessments. Humanity had jumped from barely registering on galactic power scales to being classified as a potential existential threat to any civilization that opposed them. In the weeks that followed, the political landscape of the galaxy shifted dramatically. The Zephyrian Empire, humiliated by their defeat, retreated to their home systems and began a period of isolation. Other major powers rushed to establish favorable relationships with humanity before someone else gained an advantage, but perhaps the most significant change was psychological. For 3 centuries, the galaxy had operated under the assumption that they understood the hierarchy of civilizations. Advanced species ruled while primitive species followed. That assumption was dead. Now, every alien diplomat who met with humans wondered what other primitive species might be hiding advanced capabilities. Every military commander questioned whether their intelligence assessments were accurate. Every scientist wondered what other fundamental assumptions about the galaxy might be wrong. Captain Rodriguez stood in her quarters aboard the Defiance, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed quite as friendly as they once had. Her ship was heading back to human space. But she knew the real work was just beginning. Humanity had revealed itself as a galactic power, but power came with responsibility. They would need to decide what kind of civilization they wanted to be in a galaxy that now feared and respected them in equal measure. Admiral Reeves had been right about one thing. The hunt was over, but the real challenge was just beginning. Humanity had spent 3 centuries learning how to survive in a hostile galaxy. Now they had to learn how to lead in a galaxy that suddenly looked to them for guidance. The age of human deference was indeed over. The age of human responsibility had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.